was on my second Coke when Lena finally pushed through the restaurant's revolving doors. It was 1:20. My news, that delicate flower, was wilting. When she got to the table, she shrugged off a coat that looked like a cloud. "Please don't kill me, Isabelle. I kept saying I was late for a birthday lunch." "Hey, it's not my birthday." Lena and I were friends, just not old friends. I didn't have old friends in New York. "Wait, you think it is?" "Isabelle, don't be mad." She was rummaging through her bag for cigarettes. I pushed my pack of menthols toward her, but she kept digging. When she excavated the red and white box of Marlboros, my heart did that flip it always does, and my brain blinked. Will. We smoked and looked around. The Brasserie was one of those restaurants that compelled you to watch who was being spit in and out by the revolving door, and what they were wearing, and if they were famous or just various combinations of the everyday people we saw in the elevators of the advertising and publishing offices where we each worked. Lena on Madison, me on 3rd. Looking to see was a New York tick. At 23, I was enough of a New Yorker to hold my bag close on the subway. I hadn't said pop for soda since I was 14, newly arrived from Ohio. Uncle Ben maintained I always was a New Yorker deep down, that our kind of people were born, not made. I believed him until I met girls like Lena. A busboy brought the bread basket and water, and our attention slid to the food-filled platter sailing around the busy room on the shoulders of white-aproned waiters, as if it wasn't preordained that I would order the burger medium rare and pommes frites, and Lena would order the chef salad with vinaigrette. She caught a waiter's eye, and in some cryptography of gesture specific to girls born and raised in the vicinity of East 77th Street between Madison and 5th, indicated the almost empty bread basket, the dirty ashtray, and the need for menus now. "I'm ravenous," she announced to the room at large. "Well, we have just about enough time for coffee and dessert," I said, folding my arms across my chest. Just as the waiter returned with menus, someone at the next table dropped a knife, and I practically leaped from my chair. Dr. Berger, my therapist, would call it a startle response. The knife dropper had a silk scarf wrapped pirate style around her head. When the waiter kneeled to retrieve the knife, I imagined that he was going to kiss her foot. "Can we please have more bread, please?" Lena demanded of a different white-coated back. She leaned in. "So?" She knew my sulk limit. We were roommates at Barnard our last year. "I'm going to marry Teddy." There. Now that the news was out, I deflated into my chair like an out-of-season pool toy. Then I puffed right back up again and leaned in. I was bursting to tell. The answer came to me all at once, Lena. Answer to what? "I'm going to marry Teddy." Lena tore off a piece of baguette, began buttering it. "Teddy, your friend from the photography class, Teddy," she said thoughtfully. Then, "Teddy who teaches high school?" She put down the piece of bread and the butter knife. "Wait, Teddy from Connecticut?" "He's from Milwaukee." The waiter returned and took our order. "What about work?" Lena said. Her eyes got big. "Isabelle, did you give notice?" She looked half impressed. I wasn't known for bold. I hadn't, but I had told my boss, Mrs. Singer, about Teddy. She was old Mrs. Singer, maybe 50, and lived in Queens with her husband. She'd worked in magazines since before women even worked. I hadn't planned on telling her this morning, but as soon as I said the words, my heart stopped pounding out its awful rhythm. Who will love me? Who will love me? Lately I felt homesick all the time, but not for any place I could name. Dr. Berger convinced me to try group therapy. Every Tuesday evening I left work and took the subway to the doom-laden Upper West Side, where a different psychiatrist held group in her large, high-ceilinged apartment. I took my usual seat at one end of the sofa and disguised my disapproval of everyone else behind an expression of open-hearted intelligence and alert emotional presence. I talked about Teddy a lot in group. I explained that he was the one person who, when I was with him, I never felt homesick. I said that he looked like George Gershwin and that we laughed at all the same things. Last week, an older man in the group wanted to know if Teddy was a friend of Dorothy's. I'd never heard the expression, but I knew what it meant. No one else in the group had a story I could stay interested in, except for a middle-aged Jewish woman. She'd been a hidden child in the forests of Hungary during World War II. Now that was a story. I wanted to know everything about that forest, where she slept and who watched over her, whether she was frightened all the time or bored now and then too. What did she imagine would happen to her? Did she miss her friends or think about a certain boy? Each and every week this woman talked, sometimes cried, about her disrespectful, dope-smoking teenage son. She barely mentioned the forest. Our food arrived. Lena got busy mixing the vinaigrette and I spooned ketchup onto my burger from one of those teensy bowls. "Hey, for the fries too," she said, pointing at my plate. I bit into the burger, caught the juice on my chin with the big cloth napkin, checked my watch. We only got an hour. "Teddy doesn't really know, Lena," I said then. "About us getting married, I mean. It's something I came to on my own." Lena looked up from her mixing and tossing, waited. "I'm seeing him tonight. He's going to stay over." I tried not to put too much emphasis on the last two words, though the whole idea of the sleepover had been Teddy's. Even his shrink had signed off on it. The experiment, Teddy and I called it. Lena spared one of my fries with a fork. "And you're going to get him to propose?" "No." Imagine Teddy doing anything so queer. God, no. "Then what exactly?" "It's to see if we're, you know." I wasn't going to say compatible. I just wasn't. "So you haven't slept together, ever?" "Not exactly. Not even close." "I'm hoping things go well," I added. "I know," Lena said. She sort of did, too. She wasn't an old friend, but she was a best friend. I'm sorry about your birthday. Honest to God, I thought it was today. Yesterday, but no big deal. Mrs. Singer gave me a present. That book, The Female Eunuch. Women's Lib, right? Yeah. When I tore off the paper, I felt accused of some crime. We ate, and the silence felt pretty good. The waiter came to clear the dishes. "Dessert, girls?" "Coffee," we said in unison. Just then the scarf woman at the next table got up to leave, along with her companion, an older man in a suit. It was Carly Simon. That colt. I was afraid to move, even to signal Lena, "Don't look." Thick, shaggy hair, rangy body. That's the way I always heard it should be, was a song Teddy and I listened to over and over during summer weekends when I took the train to Connecticut to hang out. Just one note of that aching melody and I could smell the sweet grass. "Maybe I could find a job here in town," I'd said to Teddy on one of those days. "Maybe we could share a place," he said. I pictured myself at work in the town's little stone library, printing out new library cards in thick black ink. After a little while, he said, "Just don't think I'm going to take care of you, Isabelle. I can barely take care of myself." The waiter dropped a check on the table, and Lena plucked it up. "My treat, Isabelle." Outside the restaurant, Lena and I hugged goodbye, then headed in opposite directions back to work. It was October, and crisp sunlight bounced off the buildings along 53rd Street. Crossing Park Avenue, you could almost believe you were a character in one of those old Technicolor career girl movies, the best years of our lives. When I rounded the corner at 51st Street, I pictured Teddy's miniature schnauzer, Gum. She'd be having puppies soon, he'd told me. If I really did move to Connecticut, he said, one of those puppies could be mine. Early that evening, my buzzer rang, and the doorman announced him. He'd taken the train into Grand Central that afternoon and gone right to the Colony Record Store to look for old Judy Garland's. I had bought wine on the way home from work, and Teddy brought dope. He rolled a few joints on a Time magazine. Dark hair flopped over his forehead, expert lick of the paper. I was on the floor, feet propped up on the sofa bed that, so early in the evening, was still a sofa. His overnight bag sat just inside the door. When he unzipped it to retrieve the joints, I saw his pillow, the consistency of applesauce, with its suggestion of sleepover, not sex. We smoked some dope and listened to the new Judy, and then to another record, a rare one, of Cole Porter singing his own songs. We debated who was the bigger star, Judy or Janis Joplin. Had I ever been so stoned? I heard myself describing the record store back home, where I first heard Judy Garland. I told him what it felt like, being 14 years old and hearing live at Carnegie Hall. And then I was telling the rest of it, getting into Will's car and the long drive into the country, and the two of us drinking wine and making angels in the leaves. I told Teddy about finding out I was pregnant. You were raped, Dr. Berger said, every time I skipped over that part of the story. The word felt like a stone in my mouth. I spit it out when she wasn't looking. Oh, honey, Teddy said, every minute or two. I just kept talking. I'd never told anyone besides Dr. Berger and Uncle Ben the whole story. Even Lena knew the official version, that I came to New York because I was unhappy at home and stayed on with my uncle. Not that I was sent here for an abortion and had a miscarriage instead. What I hadn't told anyone at all was that I decided I wouldn't have the abortion, that I would keep the baby. Now Teddy was the one person who knew all of it. When I finally stopped talking, it was night. The silence after all those words was something alive you could hold in your hand and feel pulsing against your palm. The silence ended. Teddy said, "You little lamb." We weren't even stoned by the time he went into the bathroom to change into his yellow and blue checked swim shorts. I opened up the sofa bed and put on a nightgown. A peignoir like the ones Doris Day wore in those romantic comedies wouldn't have felt any more ridiculous. Lights out, we lay down beside each other, on top of the blanket. Was I supposed to seduce him? Was he supposed to seduce me? Impossible. Maybe it was minutes, even hours later, that we fell asleep. At some point, he might have said something like, "Oh, Izzy, I think I'll just go ahead and cry myself to sleep now." I might have said something like, "It's fine, I swear, really." And it was fine, and it wasn't. When I woke the next morning, Teddy was gone, pillow and all. The buzzer bleated at 9:30 or so, and the doorman announced flowers on the way up. I slipped the card from its tiny envelope and saw Teddy's familiar handwriting. The words made me laugh out loud. "You were great last night, baby." For a day or so, I pretended. I pretended a tiny bedroom with bookshelves and flowered wallpaper looking out onto green. I pretended coming home from work and getting stoned with Teddy and laughing about everything that had happened that day. I pretended a puppy named Swanee after the Judy song, Swanee. For the rest of that weekend, I heard her voice, belting it out boisterously inside my head, its verses building to that final crescendo It sobbed for home, costumed in colored sequins and a heart-racing razzmatazz it was easy to mistake for joy. Thank you.